Brace for impact. Cross the line.
This is my destiny. It is the truth I see. In this world I fight a way to cross the line. Everybody's doing what everybody's doing. Everybody's doing the same thing. I'll be doing what I'll be doing. I'll be doing my thing. The world spins round to the right, they say. I'll be spinning the other way. Doing what I can, doing what I know. The world's my stage and I'm the show. It is my destiny. It is the truth I seek. In this world I find a way to cross the line. No possibilities for originality. Don't be left behind. Go ahead and cross the line.
Hey now, it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo on that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and we're not doing a live show today because JD and I are going to go live a little bit later, so we'll get a bunch of YouTube comments and all that stuff. I just wanted to talk just directly to the audience today and talk to the Patreon audience specifically. I might clip this for YouTube. Depends on what kind of topics I can get into. Not a ton of topics for TNA right now. We're kind of like a little bit of a lull in the action. Of course, we just had the Christmas holiday, and I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. I'm currently wearing and utilizing Christmas gifts. I got this new Calvin Klein bomber jacket. I got my new sweater here from, I think my wife got it from Macy's. I'm not sure. New headset. I also got a pair of lapel microphones, but they don't work. So we had to pivot to get this headset. And if the lapel mic doesn't work, it doesn't work on my iPad, doesn't work on my iPhone. Like the devices get picked up on both the iPad and the iPhone, but StreamYard will recognize it, but it doesn't work on StreamYard because it's not compatible with StreamYard. And I'm like, well, I typically just use StreamYard, which is why I'm, doing a StreamYard show with my headset versus a Patreon live show. So, but I hope everybody had a really good Christmas, man. My kids are spoiled. We keep saying every year we're not going to buy these little shits a ton of toys. And every year they get a ton of toys. My son got a slide. He's already got 3 head injuries from it, like one of those little types of slides. He goes down pretty well, but one time he went down and like his feet got caught at the bottom and he went head first into the floor. And then last night, while my wife was cooking dinner, he went off the side and did a header into the tile by the fireplace. So we had to move the slide and create like a padded area for him to do his slides on. But if he falls again, I told Ashley her that we got to get rid of that damn thing, because at some point he's going to get CTE if he keeps hitting his head. I keep thinking it's like, oh, he's a boy, he'll be fine. But no, head injuries are real. So I don't want him to keep slamming his head on the fucking floor. So TNA had a Christmas show. They did a end of the year awards and all that. I'm not going to read off what their awards were because for the most part, I think that the voting is fake and that they're kayfabe. Like maybe the voting's real. I don't know. But it just seems like the winners were all pretty convenient, I think. Like Mike Centeno winning Wrestler of the Year makes sense. The Ash by Elegance winning Knockout of the Year, kind of suspect, right? I thought there were other women that had better years than her, and she didn't even work the full year. She retired in September. So she won the title, and I don't even know if she ever defended the belt. She ended up dropping the title like right away. So there's a lot of arguments as to who probably should have been Masha Slamovich, but what happened with her. So I guess it makes sense that Ash by Elegance would have won. But I want to talk some of my year-end awards, guys, that I think that did a really good job this year. My favorite match of the year, favorite show of the year. So I'm going to get into that. But like I said, there's not a ton of news to talk about. Let me see. I just want to get a quick ticket update for Albuquerque. Okay, here it is. Oh, nope, that's not even Albuquerque. That was Curtis Colwell. So Curtis Colwell is like at 1,474 for the TNA on AMC debut. Just like I said last week, they are about halfway sold. So the initial count was 1,474 out of 3,070. So a little less than halfway. They'll fill that place up. I think they'll get to 3. I'm pretty sure they'll get to 3. They'll probably get to 3 both nights. How they get to 3, come on. We know how they get into 3. Most of them are going to be sold. A lot of them will be comped. They'll get people in the building. They always get people in the building. They never. That's the thing about this current regime. Other than I think a couple of tapings, like that live show from that they just recently did on a Thursday night. Where was it at Full Sail University? For whatever reason, they couldn't get people in there. They only had like 200 people. But I think that was because the prices were just too high. And then the Providence show right after Slammiversary, I thought was the other one where it just like looked really bad on television. But other than those 2 shows, for the most part, they're doing a great job of getting people in the building by any means necessary. And that's a good thing. So I don't have the Albuquerque numbers in front of me. I'm going to ask Dobby the Brain Heenan. What is the first count for ABQ? Okay. So some of you guys might be wondering why last night we didn't do a Mike and JD show. Do you really have to ask? The 49ers and the Bears played one of the greatest football games that I've ever seen in my life. Neither team decided to play defense until the 49ers played a little bit of defense in the final bell when they finally got a pass rush on Caleb Williams, and then he just kind of crumbled in the last second and threw an awful pass. And he missed a guy that was completely wide open in the back of the end zone. I think it was DJ Moore was wide open in the back of the end zone, but it was like across the other side of the field. But with Caleb's arm, he probably could have made that throw had he seen it, but he just totally missed it. And then he tried to hit somebody that was a little bit closer, but he just threw the ball into the dirt because he got speared by, I think it might have been Sam Okawanu, the 49ers defensive end, one of many defensive ends on this team that can't get to the quarterback. Finally, they pushed Caleb outside the pocket in the very last second, and then Okawanu was able to get the spear on him and hit him while he was throwing, and then the ball just went into the dirt in the final seconds. But what a fucking game. Incredible game. Caleb Williams is a good quarterback. I've made a lot of fun of him, but like he is super talented. His completion percentage is terrible. He misses a lot of wide open throws, but for whatever reason, if you get the ball past like 30 yards, he can hit it on a dot. The guy's arm strength is just incredible. He can do things on the football field that most normal humans can't do, which is why he was the number 1 overall pick. But he's great. But you know who's better than him? Brock Purdy. You see that fucking guy? Insane. Just completely insane football player. He had a little bit of Mahomes in him last night. A lot of Drew Brees with how he's hitting guys over the middle and just pushing the ball down the field, and then like Mahomes style, evading pressure, escaping pressure. Looked a lot like Montana at times with how he's moving inside the pocket, and then how he's dancing around on the outside. That pass to Juszczyk where he, he got pushed out the pocket, sprinted to the left, made a guy miss, and then ran right up, and then made the defense go one way, and then he just chucked it to Juszczyk off to the side and got him in the end zone for a touchdown. I mean, he was just incredible. Outside of that pick six, he had basically a flawless game. He is just fantastic. I think the 49ers have the best offense in the league right now. I think they've scored over 43 games in a row, or have gotten either close to 40 or over 43 games in a row. Brock Purdy, only playing 8 games this season so far, has got 20 passing touchdowns. I think he's got 25 touchdowns overall with his running touchdowns. He's hit 5 touchdowns 2 weeks in a row. I mean, come on, give me a break. The guy is just off the charts, incredible. All right, so let's get into some of the stuff that's been going on. And the first thing I want to talk about is Anna Jay. She is hitting free agency soon. I don't think that AEW is going to re-sign her, and I think that's a mistake by AEW because I do think that she's somebody that's probably going to go somewhere else and be a bigger star. AEW is pretty top heavy, and they're especially in that division, right? They got Statlander, who is their girl, and they've been pushing her for a long time, and then they finally broke her through to the world title. I don't think that she's as over as they want her to be, but she's established. Of course, you got Toni Storm, you got Mercedes Moné. They're trying to make Athena a thing. I don't know that that's ever going to work. I got nothing against Athena. They've just kept the Ring of Honor title on her for like 2 years now. I could take or leave Athena. Anna Jay is like, you would think that she's green, but she's been around for like 4 or 5 years, so you think that she'd be pretty good by now, but she just hasn't grown in that system. And they moved her to the tag team division, and that kind of ran its course. And all signs are pointing towards her leaving AEW, and she is probably going to head to WWE, although Dave Meltzer reported a couple weeks ago that WWE's been telling people that they're full, but I think they would probably take someone like Anna Jay. If you just take one look at her and the fact that she's coming from AEW, she's somebody that they're going to give a shot to. But this is a TNA podcast. Do I think TNA is going to sign her? No. Should they sign her? Absolutely. I would sign her in a heartbeat. I would make her the focal point of that Knockouts division. You got Dani Luna. I would put the belt on Dani Luna right away. Lei Ying Lee's nice. Dani Luna's your champion, and she's the heel champion. And I think the division runs through her as far as like all the challengers. But top babyface, I would get rid of Indy Hartwell, and I would put Anna Jay in that top babyface role for sure. She's better than Indy Hartwell. Indy Hartwell's more over just because she came from WWE. I just don't see anything in her. I think she's taking up a roster spot. She doesn't appear to be someone that's selling a ton of tickets. She doesn't appear to be someone that's selling a ton of merch. She's just kind of there. And she gets pops because the NXT fans remember her from when she was a comedy figure on the show. Now, if they want to keep her around and make her do a comedy act, I guess that would be fine. But having her as your top babyface in the division, I think, is a giant mistake because she just doesn't have it. She really doesn't. Anna Jay, I don't know that she has it either, but they got to take a chance. And they took a chance on Indy, and it has not worked out. I don't think Indy is signed long term. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if her deal wasn't up by now. I would move on from her unless you want to just keep her around as a comedy figure. And I would bring in Anna Jay for sure. Clip that. I would bring in Anna Jay for sure, and make her the focal point of that Knockouts division. As far as on the babyface side, you got Dani Luna heel, Anna Jay babyface. They can flip the title back and forth, however they want to do it. But this would be TNA's opportunity to establish a young female. You're signing them from AEW. You beat WWE to the punch, knowing that WWE's probably going to take her eventually if she gets to be pretty good. But if it is true, the WWE is saying that they're full and they might not be interested in Anna Jay, that's a person that TNA should absolutely take a flyer on. I don't think it's take a flyer. I think she's a good talent. She is. And for the level that TNA's at, like that's a good start for them. That would be a good get for them. Next up in free agency news is David Finlay, Fit Finlay's son, former TNA Tag Team Champion David Finlay, is hitting free agency. If you've heard this before, it's because its story comes out every year at this time. Right around January 1st, right around January 4th actually, but it's usually within a couple of weeks, give or take, we find out that David Finlay's contract is coming due and that he's interested in a move to the States. I think we've heard it for 4 years in a row. Chris Hamza even, I think, posted it in one of the Discords that I'm on. and he screenshotted the stories that have come out every year. But there's been some chatter the last couple of days that this actually might be the year that he makes the move. Where would he go? Well, his dad works for NXT, but WWE has passed on him before. And I don't know that he is the type of star that they would be looking for. David Finley's good. He's pretty good. Now, I will admit, I have not been watching his run this year, but I did see some people talk about his run this year might have been his best run so far in New Japan. But what I had seen years previous is I saw a guy with some talent who is not a top star, who is a pretty good wrestler, a solid wrestler that could be a good mid-card, upper mid-card in most companies. Probably not a top guy. If TNA did bring him in, I don't think they would see him as a top guy. Could be wrong. Tommy Dreamer obviously has an affinity for Fit Finley. I could see him maybe wanting to bring in David Finley. It would be a big deal to me if they brought him in, and I would want them to push him up as maybe a challenger for Mike Santana, should Mike Santana finally get the belt back and kind of go on a long babyface run. I don't know that that's ever going to happen, but we'll see. But I would see him more in that international title range for TNA, and that's a good spot to be for a guy like for David Finley. NXT did sign David's brother Brogan Finley, and they changed his name, and they did the same thing to Regal's kid. They brought him in to change his name, and he's going nowhere. In fact, he's probably some of his best stuff has been overseas and in TNA than he's had in NXT. So I don't know that WWE would be the spot for him. I don't think that TNA would actually make a play for him because he was never a WWE star, and he was never a AEW star. And if they're going to bring somebody in that they would have to turn into a star, they're probably going to bring them in at a lower level. And I think David Finley sees himself making more money than what TNA would probably offer. That's just my read on the situation. I don't know that for a fact. But again, just spitballing here. I just see the way TNA operates, and especially since if Scott D'Amore were in charge, I think that he would make a play for Finley for sure. But Scott D'Amore is no longer in the company. Since he's left, they've gotten rid of guys that are like really good wrestlers who aren't big stars. They got rid of Josh Speedball, although Speedball probably wouldn't have left. I think Josh would have stayed had TNA made him an offer for sure. In fact, I know for a fact he would have. They lost Speedball. I think Speedball was going. They purposely got rid of Kushida. Got rid of Trent Seven. And they got rid of several other guys because I don't think that they thought that they were worth the money that they were making because they weren't big stars in the U.S. And then who did they replace them with, right? The first name that comes to mind is Elijah. Like, that's the type of guy that they're going for. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine who was pretty plugged in with the Japan scene. And he's like, do you think TNA would take him? I was like, well, he's not a big U.S. star. He's never a big star in WWE. He was never a big star in AEW. And he can't sing. So I don't know. I don't know that TNA would value him. He's a good wrestler, and I think he would upgrade the work rate in the company. I think he's found himself as a heel in Japan. But they don't really care what happens in Japan. They don't value that. And I just don't think that they would see it in him. And that's a shame. They would value somebody off the NXT roster more so than they would value David Finley, who would be 100 times better than somebody off the NXT roster. They would value a lower level WWE guy working, lower card matches on Raw and, on WWE main event than they would a David Finley. That's just the reality of the situation. With exceptions to people that have made it into AEW. Now, would he be a fit in AEW? I think that he would be a fit, but I don't think that Tony sees it in him either. And it's like, Mike, how could you say that? Why would you think that? Tony never brings David Finley in. You can tell the guys that he wants in his company from New Japan. He constantly brings them in all the time. He would take Zack Sabre Jr. today if Sabre wanted. He was obviously look who they signed that they kept bringing in. They signed Jay White, who had been doing shots for AEW, like right after AEW and New Japan started working together. Jay White immediately started coming in, and the next thing you know, Jay White signs with AEW. They brought in Will Ospreay a lot, right? And then of course he's one of the greatest in the world, but you could tell that they wanted him in because they kept bringing him in from Japan. They kept asking to borrow him. Okada kept coming in and doing matches. And the list just goes on and on. Gabe Kidd now, like when Gabe Kidd's contract is expired, he's coming to AEW for sure. Like he's going to be done in Japan at some point, and he's going to be working for AEW. And I mean, like Mercedes Moné, of course, right? Like she was a New Japan wrestler, and eventually they just brought her in. They just signed her. So David Finlay hasn't been one of those guys. They have not been bringing him in. So I think that if they wanted him, they could have had access to him this whole time, and they have just not brought him in. So, I don't think that it's a lock that he goes to AEW. In fact, I think it's more than likely that he stays in New Japan. More than likely, he stays in New Japan. Clark Connors, his deal's coming up. I think he stays in New Japan too. He's not very good. Like he looks like I always call him. I call him middle school Adam or 8th grade Adam Page. Like he wears the cowboy hat. He's got the curly hair. He's got the facial hair that looks just like him. He sometimes dresses like a cowboy, and he's got the way his face looks. He just looks like a smaller version of Hangman. And it's like, why would you bring in Hangman on Wish? I don't know. But he's not a bad wrestler, but he's just, there's nothing about Clark Connors that screams to me that somebody needs to sign this guy. I think he stays with New Japan. I think that's the only company that would value him or covet him. And you see the level that they see him at. He's, working 6-mans, and like he's never going to be a star for New Japan. And I don't think that he'll ever be a star in America. That's mean to say. That's just my read on the situation. I hope he proves me wrong. I got nothing against the guy. I'm sure he's a fine person. I just don't see him being a major star in the U.S. And because of that, I don't think that TNA would value him. Okay, now let's get some of my awards for the year. Wrestler of the Year for TNA. Mike Santana. Like, is there even a doubt? Like, would you pick anybody else? I guess an argument could be made for Joe Hendry. But Joe Hendry, petered out in May. He won the title at Genesis. He defended the title at Rebellion, and in that 3-way. And then a month after that, he lost the title to Trick Williams, and then that loss kind of killed him dead in TNA. Like he lost a lot of luster. Now he's on SmackDown and he's doing his gimmick and he's going to be over with that audience. But as far as TNA goes, since May, he's really been nothing. And since right around that time, everybody's been on Mike Santana. And Mike Santana really started to ascend. He probably should have won the title at Slammiversary. He ends up getting it at Bound for Glory, immediately loses it, but he's been the top babyface in the company since the summer. And which he outlasted Joe Hendry. Now, Joe Hendry did have the WrestleMania moment, which I think TNA said is the moment of the year, and that's fine. And I don't disagree with that. Like, as far as crossover moment of the year, that was a big moment. A lot of people say that was what led to Joe Hendry's downfall. I disagree, because 2 weeks later, he was headlining Rebellion, and he was the most over guy next to the Hardys on the show. You get to Slammiversary. He had already lost the title to Trick. He had lost to Frankie Kazarian a couple weeks before that. And he was 3 of 3 in that match. Like, it was Trick, it was Mike. Mike Santana was most over. Trick was next. And Joe Hendry was just the third wheel, and he's there to eat the pin because they wanted to get to Trick and Santana at Bound for Glory. So, yeah, Mike Santana definitely is the wrestler of the year for TNA. Male wrestler of the year. Female wrestler of the year. It's hard to go against Masha, but you can't. But on the show, we can look at reality. From January to September, she was the wrestler of the year. She had the best matches. She had the biggest matches in the division. She got the victories over everybody. She ended up losing the title to Jacy Jayne, but she was, featured on NXT television. I think they started to phase her down in like August because they knew that she was probably going to be out the door. And then of course the big scandal broke in September. But she had a really good run with that title, man. And she's a really good wrestler. I think, I don't know if they're going to bring her back or not. The scandal's pretty big, and she's kind of toxic right now. I think I thought the heat would die down by now, but it hasn't. The heat hasn't really died down. Hold on. And will it? I don't know. Like when the internet when they're able to cancel somebody, they want to keep them canceled, right? And Tessa was successfully canceled for 5 years. She had to go to Mexico where none of these whites are watching wrestling, right? And they kept her canceled for 5 years, and they have been railing against her ever since, and it has not worked. Tessa has kind of taken some of the power away from them with some of her stuff, and it seems like they're finally giving up on trying to keep Tessa off television because they just realize it's not working. The She's a Racist chants have stopped, and so they have essentially, hold on. So, and they've essentially given up on her. So now Masha is like the next person. And I'm not saying Masha doesn't deserve to be held accountable. She does. I'm pretty sure there's more to the story there with her. But how long should she go without work is the question. This is her job. Does she deserve to lose her job forever when what she did was personal in her personal life? I don't know. I think a lot of people would say, yes, she deserves to stay gone forever for abusing her boyfriend. But other people would say, maybe she works on herself. She goes through therapy. She, gets a hold of the substance abuse issues, and now you got like a comeback story. Could she do that? Mike votes yes, but she has to take steps to get to that point, and she has to show some type of accountability, and we'll see if she does. Tag team of the year. I mean, come on, Hardys. Give me a break. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Without the Hardys, you don't get an AMC deal. Without the Hardys, you don't sell, break all these records that they supposedly have been breaking. They, of course, have re-signed with the company. They're going to be around for a long time. They are the company. They are the top drawing act in the company. It's the first time in forever that a tag team is the top drawing act for a major wrestling promotion, which should lend credibility to their Hall of Fame case. I don't know if it will. I think it should. Nobody's going to see it that way because they just don't value TNA, like TNA's not on their radar. The Hall of Fame voters, I don't think. But if you take a look at a deep dive into the numbers, and you see what the Hardys have been able to do for this company, they're the most valuable players for the company. Like, I did male wrestler of the year, Santana. It really should have just been the Hardys, because without the Hardys, TNA is nothing right now. They are significantly worse off without the Hardys. Significantly. And that's a testament to the stars that they are. And I think if people were being honest and wanted to, get their emotions out of it, I know that they're upset that the Hardys left AEW, that their run didn't go well in AEW. They're going to hold that against them forever. But if you're an intelligent human being and you're a good person, you would understand that the Hardys are a drawing act. They're the top act in this company. They're the MVPs for this company. And without the Hardys, they don't get an AMC TV deal. They just don't. That is a fact. That's undeniable. They are a valuable property. They're valuable drawing cards, and they deserve and warrant consideration for the Hall of Fame. End of story. If you're not voting for them, you should really take a deep dive and look at what they're bringing to the table. You can say, well, hey, they're not doing 10, 15, 20,000. Okay, but in a smaller company, look at what they're doing above what that company used to do. It's greater, right? And they're the top stars. You have to factor that in. People always said that the Young Bucks were drawing for Ring of Honor, and they weren't up until All Out. They didn't do the 10, 15, 20,000s. They weren't doing that. Before they had been drawing for years above what, like, you put them on an indie show, you put them in Ring of Honor, and they're doing 20, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 200 to 300% greater than what that company was doing previously. Same thing with the Hardys. All these indie shows around, they're making them the top act, and these shows are doing great with the Hardys on top. And they're doing the same thing at TNA. So, Hall of Famers, Hardy Boys. No, I mean, it's a no-brainer at this point. I don't think there's a good argument against them. Okay, match of the year. I personally liked Leon Slater versus Moose from Slammiversary. I just thought that the story going into the match with, Leon Slater wanting to be the youngest X Division champion ever. You had Moose, who was the former world champion, guy in his 40s, a legacy star. And the system had been beating down Leon for like a year. He lost to every member of the system, and he worked his way back up and finally got a shot at the X Division title. And so you had that going into the match, and then the match I thought was just outstanding. I thought both guys worked it really well. I thought Moose was fabulous in the match, and Leon Slater really became the star that he is right now because of that match. That was when we saw Leon as like, okay, this guy's a main event guy. Like, this guy could be a main event star. And then like the next month or 2 months later, what was it, Victory Road or Emergence? I can't remember. Him and Myron main evented. And that match deserves consideration for sure for match of the year. But me personally, I just think what it brought to the table. And then of course afterwards, you get the AJ Styles coming in and raising Leon's hand and doing the whole speech and kind of putting over AJ. Or not putting over Leon. I thought that whole thing, start to finish, was fantastic. I talked about Myron and Leon at Victory Road. Another one that deserves consideration is, and I think that actually won TNA's match of the year on the TNA awards, but it was Mustafa Ali and Mike Santana. Like, that was awesome. And that whole feud was great. They need to revisit that this year. I know that I don't know how long Ali signed for. I think a lot of people are just waiting to find out when that money's going to start rolling in. So they're just kind of putting Band-Aids on some of these contracts and just rolling them over every few months. But Mike needs to win the title in the first episode of AMC. He needs to successfully defend it at Genesis against Nick Nemeth. And then by Rebellion, we need to pivot to a match with Mustafa Ali. That's the move. They got a feud with Ali. It was fantastic last year. It's something they can always go back to. I think Ali's doing the best work of his career right now. He's a main event level caliber star, and just an all around fantastic performer. He's got great promos, great matches, the great gimmick, the total package. He rules. Show of the year, man. Probably, it's difficult because, which tells you that they didn't have a ton of great shows, but I'm probably going to go with Genesis. I enjoyed Genesis. I thought Rebellion was pretty good too, but just kind of like looking back on it, I could go back and forth between Rebellion and Genesis. But I don't really have any other awards to give out. I think that was really all I had on the awards thing. I typically do like a voting thing, but I just didn't get to it this year. TNA took a lot of time off in Q4, so it's just been kind of hard to keep up and just kind of create content out of nothing. Outside of the TV deal, there hasn't been a ton of news. I've been kind of stretching out the TV deal news a lot. So that's been difficult, but anyway, that's going to do it for me this time. I got to get out of here, and me and JD are going to be recording probably in like 2 hours. So until next time, mahalo.